Hey everyone, I just went live. I'm on live on Instagram and I'm live here. I'm live on Instagram and here I'm live on Facebook, YouTube, and X. And I believed that I was going to be able to go live on all of them using the same camera, but apparently I don't have RTMP access on Instagram yet. So I'm going to have to keep going back and forth between cameras, so I apologize. First comment from Brian. How's it going, Spike? It's going great, Brian. Thanks so much for asking. I've got a few things I'm going to go over with you, hang out with a little bit. Hey, Alan. We got a bunch of stuff here that we're going to go over. I'm going to hang out for like an hour or so. And I took a bunch of questions ahead of time. Because when I used to do these live streams, I would go through the comments for the for questions, and what would end up happening is I would just be sitting there reading, and then when I would look back and watch it, I'm like, this is terrible. I wouldn't watch someone reading. So instead, I've already got some questions. I might take a look at the comments every once in a while, but we'll see. I will at least respond to some comments, but for the most part, I've got the questions here. But first, I want to give an update on something that You Are the Power has been working on for quite some time. So if you've been following me and You Are the Power, you probably already know somewhat about this, but I got some new updates. In Columbia, South Carolina, we are working with an organization called Be Kind, Be Great, which is run by a lady named Erica Brown. And she, what Erica does is she goes out every Friday and goes and provides food and other necessary supplies, toiletries, hygiene products, and things like that to people in need, mostly homeless people in various parts of Columbia, South Carolina. She's been doing this for years. Has had no problem. In fact, she's even partnered with local universities, local sports teams, all sorts of different groups to provide help to these folks. And no, there was no problem until I guess a couple months ago now. She was stopped by police, or police approached her while she was helping people, and they told her if she did it again, they'd fine her and possibly arrest her for helping people. And so she went out to the media and tried to get the word out of what was going on. It got to us, and then so we immediately went to action and announced that we were joining her and that we would also be going out and doing it. We invited the police and the mayor and the city council to come out and join us as well to do this because there's nothing wrong with helping people. People should be able to help people. And, we had a pretty good first shot when we went out there. No one came to stop us. In fact, I think some police actually showed up towards the end to say that they loved what we were doing. And so we followed up by going to the next city council meeting. And in a video that has since gone viral on most social media, I confronted the city council about it and said, I don't think any one of you would do what you're doing right now outside of your capacity as a government official. You wouldn't just walk up to someone and say, hey, you better stop feeding that person, or you better pay me off first, or else we're going to have trouble. You would never do that. So why are you doing that in your capacity as a government official? If someone is helping someone, the correct response to that is to either, ignore it and walk away, or say, hey, that's great, can I help? Or just say, hey, that's great, and keep moving. At no point is it acceptable to walk up and go, hey, you quit doing that, or you better give me some money, or you better do it the way I tell you to, or we're going to have trouble. So anyway, that's why, that's what we've been working on with them. We got a couple updates on that. One, we had a meeting, some members of You Are the Power had a meeting with the mayor, who acknowledged that the plan that they were proposing has not been working. They've been proposing that everyone in Columbia basically walk every day to a place called Hope Plaza, which is kind of in the middle of the city, in order to be fed. The problem is that's miles away for some of these folks, some of whom would have to walk along highways and cross bridges to get there. And they'd have to walk through residential neighborhoods. And you start having questions about things like, where are they going to use the restroom while they're walking to and fro 10, 15 miles a day, there and back to get fed once that day? What are they going to, what about safety issues, traffic safety issues? Like, how is having, homeless people, forget the fact that many of them can't do it, right? Like, I mean, there are many homeless people that are in wheelchairs or that have injuries or are, on crutches and things like that. They can't do, or they're elderly. They have sciatica issues. They have, they have different health issues. They can't do it. And then you have ones that have PTSD or they have addiction issues, mental health issues, things like that. It's not safe for them to be doing this. But for the ones who are able-bodied to do this, what about all the health and safety issues that come from telling a few hundred people scattered across the city that they have to take this caravan journey into the center of the city, going through residential communities there and back to be able to get a meal, possibly, because there may not be food for them by the time they get there. So the mayor at least seems to understand that this isn't going to be a good idea moving forward, and has signaled at least a level of agreeability that at least part of the answer here is for the government to let people help people. It's insane that we've had to come this far to get that, but it looks like we're headed in that direction. I'm going to be going to Columbia this Tuesday. I'm going to be meeting with the city council at their next meeting, and I'm going to formally invite them to an event that we're having on the 30th called Walk a Mile in Their Shoes. We've actually picked one of the closer spots where a lot of homeless folks are at a place called Finley Park, and we're going to do the walk from it's about a mile walking to Hope Plaza and back, and we're going to have food and beverages for everyone who wants to join us. We're intentionally picking the closest one to invite people to join us so they have no excuse not to join us if they are able-bodied to be able to do that. And the point is to say, hey, this is the easiest walk. And imagine having to do this every day. And bring all your stuff with you, because you can't, it's not like you can leave your stuff behind at the park or wherever you're staying. That's littering. So you have to take all your stuff and bring it with you. Imagine having to do that every day, even from this very close location. Forget out in West Columbia or any of these Irmo or any of these other areas that are further out, that are miles and miles away. Just picture doing this mile there and mile back every day with all your stuff, and the possibility being that there might not be any food there. So we're inviting them to do that and to join us. And I'm hoping that by the time I get there, that they will be announcing that they're going to just let people help people. That's my hope. It seems like we've had quite a bit of movement in that direction, and ultimately we shall see. But if you would like to come out this Tuesday, is that the 19th? Yes, the 19th. Tuesday the 19th. We're going to have a rally starting at 3 p.m. And it's at the City Council of Columbia, South Carolina. So it's at the City Hall there in downtown Columbia. And you can join us for the rally. And then at 4 p.m. we'll be going in for the City Council meeting. We'll be speaking to the council there. So if you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you. But also if you'd like to join us on the 30th, and I'm putting the link in the comments for Facebook, X, and YouTube. I might accidentally call it Twitter. Let me see if I can do this from my computer. I'm having to stream on my phone on Instagram, but let me see. Yeah, it's not showing my live here. Okay. Here, I'll send this to myself. Give me 1 second. I will also send the link to, actually, no, if you're on my Instagram, you can go to my bio, and the link is there in my bio. It's called Walk a Mile in Their Shoes. We'd love to have you RSVP. You can show up if you want to. You don't have to RSVP. But we want to make sure we have enough food for everyone. So if you're bringing an appetite, RSVP and make sure we have enough food for you. It's in my bio, and I've just put it in the link in my chat on Facebook, on X and YouTube, and you can RSVP there. It's going to be on the 30th, which is a Saturday, at Finley Park in Columbia. We're walking to Hope Plaza and back, so we'd love to have you join us there. And that's what we've been working on there. See here. BV Luminous says, Spike, you're my second favorite person on earth. That is only because I exist. I love you. Thank you for everything you do to call out the crap. Well, thank you, BV. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate it, and I do what I can, man. Or lady. I'm not sure what BV is. But thank you. So I have some questions that were already selected amongst all of the questions that were left for me yesterday and today. I'll go ahead and address the elephant in the room. A whole bunch of y'all asked various versions of am I running in 2024? And the short answer is I'm figuring that out. I'm determining what, I haven't ruled it out. I'm determining what I'm going to do for 2024. And the short answer is I'm going to do however I can, whatever I should be doing to best help the liberty movement. And if it's to continue to double down on growing and expanding You Are the Power, which is what I've been doing for the past couple of years, and leaving the presidential race to someone else, then that's what I'll do. If it is to take a break from You Are the Power and put a good team in charge to continue our plans for expansion and growth in You Are the Power and run for president, then I will do that. But however I determine I am of best use to this movement, that's what I will do. I have not ruled it out. If and when I do rule it in, if I do decide to do it, I'm not going to be coy about it. I'm not going to keep a secret. Pretty soon after I make that determination, the rest of you will know. If I decide not to do it, the same thing. You will know pretty immediately soon after I know that. So we will see. But either way, I'm not going anywhere. I am very much a part of growing this movement. And I will continue to do that. So that, and then I guess a secondary question, someone just mentioned this as well in the chat. Who do you support? Do you support this candidate or that candidate or anything else? I mean, of any of the libertarian candidates running, they would do far better than anyone else we're being offered. Also, just about all the people running are my friends. I know them personally, that are running for the libertarian nomination. And if I do decide to run, I'm not running against any of them. I have essentially nothing but good to say about the people that are running. But in terms of which one I decide to pick over the other one, I really don't want to get into that because I don't want to look like I'm trying to put my thumb on the scale of who the delegates should select. I trust them to make the right decision, and always have, and I'd rather not get into that. But I do appreciate the support from everyone. Alex asked, will you answer my question on your live stream? Yes. Jim asks, what is the true source of freedom and security? Why can you generally expect to be safe and able to pursue your happiness? This is a very good question. I would say, I believe that there's basically two different ways of asking the same question. I think the reason that we can generally expect to be safe and, reasonably expect that we can go out and do the things we want to do that day and make it home safe and then be able to thrive based on that expectation of safety is because we have a reasonable expectation that the people that we will interact with or come into contact with have some level of respect for us as individual people. And I don't mean respect like they like who we are or they respect our opinions or even know who we are, but they respect that we are individual human beings with our own lives, our own boundaries, our own autonomy, and our rights and so forth. Like they understand that they can't come over and, harm us. And they have a reasonable expectation that we're not going to go over and harm them. And it's that base level of expectation that allows us to be able to thrive. Otherwise, we'd be in constant fear. And if you look at the places where people don't have that reasonable expectation, whether it's in a very unsafe city or an unsafe part of town or a war-torn country or whatever else, those folks can't thrive. They don't have that basic level of expectation. We talk a lot about high trust societies. Well, what's high trust in what? The reasonable expectation that the people you're going to interact with, generally speaking, respect you, respect your humanity, and aren't going to try to infringe upon it. Unless it's the government. We do this really weird thing where we're all human beings, right? Like there aren't, special, like a different species besides humans. Like we're all, any intelligent species that you communicate with or that communicates with you, we're all human beings. We're all on that same level. But when some of those human beings get into positions of power, suddenly we don't have that same level of expectation that they respect us as individual human beings. It's like we put that aside. Like if you look at what government officials will do, if you look at what the human beings who assume those roles and those titles do on a regular basis, we wouldn't tolerate that from anyone else. We wouldn't tolerate people saying, I'm going to make you tell me how much money you owe me for nothing. You have to give it to me or else I'm going to make your life miserable. And if I think you've gotten it wrong, I'm going to make your life even more miserable. And I'm going to use this money basically however I want. And if you don't like it, you can replace me with someone else who's going to do the exact same thing. Like that's the job, that's the role. It's not just me as an individual. That's the role, that's the job that I do here. And if you get out of line, I got some people with guns who can come and they're going to make things tough for you. This is a protection racket that I'm describing. This is a mob that I'm describing. And we wouldn't tolerate that mob. We wouldn't tolerate that kind of thing. We might allow it to exist out of fear of retribution or harm, but that's different than tolerance. And frankly, that's the same thing we have with government. I mean, the reason we tolerate government and pay taxes for those of us that are paying taxes, for those of us that anytime we comply, it's for one of two reasons. Either because we would have complied anyway. I don't need a law against murder to not murder anyone today. So it's either because we would have complied anyway, or because in the cases where we comply on something we wouldn't have done, it's because we don't want to deal with the repercussions. We don't want to deal with the harm that they're imposing on us. That is a complete, total lack of respect for us as individual human beings. And just like if we expected that someone walking down the street, that they were going to mug us, or that they were going to tell us how to live our lives, or that they were going to threaten to kidnap us if we didn't listen to them, that would make our lives worse. Same is true when it happens from government. And a big part of what we do at You Are the Power is to spread the idea of human respect, of respecting individual human beings. We recognize that when people respect each other as individual human beings, that we are at our happiest and our most prosperous and our most harmonious. That's the ideal thing for society. That's the ideal way for us to live as a society. And we're never going to reach perfect 100% respect. There's always going to be bad actors. But to whatever level we can get as close to that 100% as possible, the better things are. And as close as we get to 0% of human respect, the worse things are. And so we should be expecting the same respect from people in positions of power and of government that we would respect for those exact same human beings if they weren't in those positions. I don't care if you're a senator or a congressman or a president or city council person, mayor, sheriff, cop, whatever. I don't care. If the exact same human being outside of that role, we would not tolerate them acting that way. So we shouldn't tolerate them when they're in that role. Nothing magic happened. They're the exact same people. They did not become magic people who could suddenly do this to us. So those are my thoughts on that. Jake says, what can I tell people to show them that voting something other than Republican or Democrat is not wasting your vote and is actually a better choice than settling for the lesser of two evils? Well, the first thing I'd ask them is, are you better off now than you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever? This will depend on how old they are. If you ask a 20-year-old if they're better off than they were 15 years ago, you're not going to get a solid answer. But if if ask them, for however long you've been an adult, are things better now than they were? Most people are going to say no. Remind them that Republicans and Democrats have been in charge of government at every level, local, state, and federal, during that time, that they've worked together hand in hand to help create the reality that they live in, and that they may have been voting for lesser evils along the way, but that just meant that they got however much more evil cumulatively over that time. And that, to me, wasting your vote is voting for the same two parties and the same two candidates who created the mess that we're in right now. That's wasting your vote. Throwing your vote away is voting for the status quo, especially since there are already so many people voting for the status quo. Why would I join them? I'd rather vote for something. If I already know that the likelihood is that the status quo is going to win, red status quo, blue status quo, whatever, that the status quo is going to win, why would I vote for that? That's already a waste of vote. Even if I wanted that status quo, voting for it is kind of useless because I already know it's going to win. And if I don't want that status quo and someone else is offering a stark alternative from the status quo that resonates with me, that I believe is actually a good idea, why on earth would I not vote for that? If I already think the status quo is going to win, well, then that means I'm already going to lose. Red, blue, whatever, I'm going to lose. If the status quo wins, I lose. I already know that. But if enough of us vote for what I'm voting for, then not only do they win, but I win for a change too, and so does everyone else. So that's what I would say to that. Now, every once in a while, you're going to run into someone who says, yes, things are better now than they were before. You're going to be hard-pressed to convince someone like that they need to, vote against the status quo. Status quo is working for them. Now, there aren't a lot of them. So, if you find someone like that who says, yes, generally speaking, I think that, government is doing better than it did when I was, a child or when I first became an adult, then, you got an uphill battle. But for the majority of people that say, no, inflation's bad and I have less, trust that things are going to get better and so forth, then remind them that both sides have been in charge multiple times. TJ asks, do bullpups really deserve that much hate? This might be the most important question that I answer in this whole thing. I think, kind of. So I like bullpups, okay? And for those who don't know, bullpups are a configuration of gun where the magazine is behind where you're holding the trigger, and that allows for you to have a more compact overall sized firearm, but also have a longer barrel in that size firearm so that there's more accuracy and so forth. So it has its uses, but because of and I'm not going to try to pretend to understand the mechanics of it, because of that configuration, the trigger is pretty squishy. It's got a pretty long pull. And, if you're on a range or something, then, whatever, like, it's just kind of annoying that it's got a longer pull, but it's kind of cool. And, it's a cool, interesting looking weapon or whatever. I have fun shooting bullpups. I shoot a lot of guns and I enjoy shooting bullpups, but in a milliseconds count situation where you're not just, shooting for fun, where you're shooting for not fun, that could be the difference between life and death. So as a tactical a weapon for operators, I can see why there's some hate. I've been told that there's some maintenance issues as well. I'm not going to pretend to be as knowledgeable on that. I would defer to the gun experts on that. But yeah, I mean, in an actual, like, I'm trying to survive this situation, having a long trigger pull is kind of the opposite of what you want. So thank you for that. Debbie says, will you stand with Maui and demand an investigation into everything? She's referring to the fires, the wildfires, or some say they're not wildfires, but whatever, the fires. Something about the whole event is fishy. Those people in Lahaina need answers at this point, and at this point don't trust the government. Yeah, I mean, I certainly think there should be multiple investigations, not just into possible motives. I know that there has been talk about trying to make that area into a smart city, and you had a small full of a small handful of individuals who owned a tremendous amount of the property, and and all of that. So I think that should be looked into. I also think the fact that I forget the state chartered I think it's Hawaiian Electric, the power utility there, completely neglected to keep up with the removal of greenery and shrubbery around their transformers and around their infrastructure, even though they'd been warned that it was a problem and that it could lead to fires. They just didn't. They were spending a fraction of it. They weren't keeping up with it. And the crazy thing about that is they were dumping all of this money into and it's not state-owned. It's actually a private company, even though it's a state-chartered company. They were pouring all of this money into so-called renewables because the state government was making them. They had introduced some kind of measure basically requiring Hawaii Electric to transition to away from fossil fuels entirely by, I think, like 2030 or some ridiculous timeline like that. And so they had to spend all this money on updating their energy usage to rely entirely on I guess wind and solar, and so as a result they weren't keeping up with their infrastructure. And it's very likely that that's what contributed to these fires. Another thing to investigate is what we've seen many times before, where the police were putting up barricades and ordering people not to leave while it was burning. And the only people who survived were the ones who just disobeyed them. Now, put yourself in the mind, because I know I got a lot of I have a disproportionately high number of edgy, do not comply type libertarians like myself. And I love all of you. But just put yourself in the mindset of the average normal human being that isn't like us out there, who just generally speaking, complies and listens. And if the government says to do something, they do it because the government told them to do it. You should do it. And that makes you a good person to do it. Now imagine a fire is happening and the police are telling you, no, you can't leave. Well, I have to leave. There's a fire and smoke and I'm having a hard time. No, you can't leave. And imagine that being the moment where you think, I don't know if they're trying to kill me or they're that stupid, but we're going to die if we listen to them. Imagine that being the moment. I mean, for many of you, the moment were the lockdowns. My moment was a few years before that, quite a few years. I'm old, so it was a long time before that. But it's we all had that moment. But imagine your moment being like you're starting to choke on smoke, and the cops are saying, "Nah, you stay here." And if it were any other entity that were doing that, it would be easy to say, this is obviously a conspiracy. This is obviously they did something wrong, and they were trying to kill everyone there. That might be. Realize that the government is that inept. They will straight up order enforcers to make everyone stay in the middle of a fire. And those enforcers will do it because they were told to, and that's their job. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have, no way does it have to make sense. They just do it. And you have to listen to them. Or else you survive. And that's often what it takes is when it's that moment, when it's like, hey, you can either obey the government or you can live. People go, oh, okay, I'll choose living. But think about the people that died because they trusted the government. They had the smoke and the fire and everything, and they said, well, but the government said this is what to do, and we just have to trust them. And they're not here anymore. Only those who disobeyed survived. Now, because I don't trust the government, the investigations can't just be from government. We need actual investigative journalists, and when I say journalists, I don't necessarily mean corporate media, although they can do it as well. I mean like everyday people digging into this. Because if we just leave it up to government to investigate this, very likely you're going to end up with a situation where the government investigated the government and found that the government did exactly what the government said that the government should do. I mean, how often have we watched that play out? So yeah, I think I'm fine with government investigations. I'm fine with, there should be investigations at every level. There should also be, private people investigating it as well. We need to get to the bottom of this. And it could be just as simple as total ineptitude at every level. And that might be the extent of the conspiracy. Or it could be something bigger. Matthew asks, hold on one second. Matthew asks, the term defund the police seems to have many interpretations. I'd like to hear what you think that means and how you would still maintain a rapid first response team for all sorts of emergencies, but also improve the liberty of citizens. Peace and Happy New Year. Thank you. Shana Tova to you. Yeah, so defund the police means like 50 different things. It has become such a watered down, or I should overused phrase. Defund the police has been used to describe everything from reducing funding of police to increase funding of other services, like mental health response and things like that, all the way to completely abolishing all policing, and many things in between. I believe that we should be defederalizing the police, getting the feds out of policing entirely, and getting the police out of federal priorities entirely. The role of policing, the role of provision of security should be protecting lives, rights, and property. That's it. We were talking about human respect earlier. If government is to exist, and if we are to consider it even remotely legitimate, then its only role should be to enforce against those who are not respecting you as an individual human being. That's it. That's all it should be doing. And that means getting the federal government out of it, because that's not their role. The Constitution says nothing about policing. In fact, without going down the whole rabbit hole, the FBI was created illegally. Congress literally forbade President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, from creating a federal police force. Imperialist that he was, he had his attorney general, whose name was Bonaparte. He was actually related to Napoleon, oddly enough. Side note there. To create it anyway. And so they created it. It later was renamed the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And then later on, they were able to get the Congress to go along with it. But originally they said, and that's why it's called the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're not police. We're not out arresting people. We're certainly not out killing anyone. We're just investigating. We're just helping the police with their investigations. We're just helping the proper role of law enforcement is at the city and state level. We're just investigating. And then we watch them. They're out killing and arresting people and framing them and assassinating them and everything else. So you got to get the feds out of policing entirely and get the police out of the feds. Remove that, divorce that entire relationship. We need to demilitarize the police. Police should not need tanks and armored and mine-resistant armored personnel carriers and drones equipped with rockets and grenade launchers and I just combined two things. Drones equipped with rockets, and grenade launcher. Like your police don't need that. I actually heard a story back in 2020. A school district got grenade launchers. They got grenade launchers. And when they were asked why they got them, they said, well, they were available, so we applied for them. You're a school district. What are the grenades for? What are you going to do with the grenades? It's just you and the children. What are the grenades for? Anyway, so they ended up giving them back because there was all this backlash. Jacob, I want grenade launchers too, and you have a right to grenade launchers, but you have to pay for them. But so we need to end militarization. Just because the Department of Defense is trying to dump their surplus on something, dump it on us. We'll buy it. Frankly, you should give it to us. We already paid for it. But we should be demilitarizing the police. And to your question about, how would you have that while still maintaining first response for emergencies? I'll say it, and I know this has been said many other times, but there's no song called "Fuck the Fire Department" or the paramedics. Like, no one's upset about that. Like, whether it's the police providing it or private industry providing it, that's not what anyone's upset about. That's not the first response anyone's upset about. But the fire department doesn't prowl around looking for potential fires and like threaten to arrest you because they see smoke in your backyard that turns out to be from a barbecue. Like that's so I think the purpose of policing should be to show up to punish people. And maybe in large metro areas there might need to be a patrol presence, but we don't need road pirates roaming around looking for the possible the most smallest infraction possible to fine you for, to collect revenue. That's not, we don't want that. No one wants that. Whenever you have your blue line supporting friends and loved ones saying, well, next time call a crackhead. They don't say next time call a crackhead when you need someone to pull you over and rob you. Make you 30 minutes late to wherever you were headed. They say call the cops next time your home gets broken into, or someone's holding you up at gunpoint or something that's almost certainly never going to happen to you. But if it does happen to you, they're probably not going to be there in time anyway. And we should stop trying to wait for law enforcement to protect us. Even if every single law enforcer was entirely incorruptible and was so heroic that at every single moment they would put your life and safety above their own and have no concern about getting home safely to their families, they still could not possibly get to you in time, get to every single one of us in time to protect us from situations where people are trying to harm us. You are your own first line of security, always and in all things. Now, with that said, if government is to provide any kind of security, it should focus only on that. End the war on drugs, end civil asset forfeiture, end victimless crime laws, end no-knock raids, end qualified immunity so bad officers are held accountable when they break their own laws. If cops are to exist, their only role should be to protect lives, rights, and property. That's it. In 2020, the Black Lives Matters riot, originally protests and then eventually riots, started out of a frustration with police brutality, qualified immunity, and war on drugs and all that stuff. It then morphed into a re-election or a Joe Biden election campaign nonsense, but initially started as frustration at that. Those police then responded by kettling and attacking the peaceful protesters. And then when either that would then turn into a riot, or opportunists would show up to take advantage of the discord and show up and start rioting and looting, then the police would stand down and let your neighborhoods get burned down. And so on one side, you had people angry at police brutality and qualified immunity and the war on drugs and all of that. And then on the other side, you had people that were upset that the people who had disarmed you and told you that they would protect you were not protecting you, and then they'd show up to arrest people like Kyle Rittenhouse. You were both angry at the same organization. Divide and conquer is a hell of a drug, folks. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. Amanda says, who makes the best smoked salmon? Well, if we're talking homemade, it's technically not smoked, it's cured, but Tom Pinkasoff, my friend who lives in New York. He's also the Northeast Regional Organizer for You Are the Power. He makes the finest gravlax, which gravlax actually translates to ground fish or dirt fish or something like that, because they used to bury it in the ground to cure it. I don't believe he's burying it in the ground. You're not burying it in the ground, are you, Tom? Are you? Did you bury him? Anyway, he cures it, and it has dill and I think like lemon peel, lemon zest, or whatever. Eskimo says I'm offended. You've never smoked salmon for me. I have no idea if your smoked salmon is good. Prove me wrong that Tom Pinkasoff's cured fish is the best. Anyway, so it's really, really great. And when we were in New York in 2021, Tasha and I did a tour around the entire state of New York, which is much larger than I thought it was. That is a large state, New York. Larry Sharp has done yeoman's work for years traversing that state. Anyway, and Tom was the guy, he was kind of at the top organizing it, and he was also our driver. And so he was with us pretty much the whole time. And every morning, he would bring me at like usually 5, 6 in the morning when we were starting. He would bring me gravlax and potatoes. Like a lot of it. I would start my morning with about 3,500 calories. Just right off, just the first waking up. I gained 15 pounds on that trip. If that man were here right now, I'd kiss him. That's who makes the best gravlax. But anyway, the company, in fact, let me look it up, because there was a brand of, hold on, Wild Alaskan Smoked Salmon. I think it's Trident. Is it Trident? Oh, you know what? I don't even know if they make it anymore. They used to, at the stores here, at the local Food Lion, a company, I think it was Trident, used to make wild Alaskan hot smoked salmon. And it was the most delicious, decadent fish I have. It was up there with some of the best, any kind of fish, not just smoked salmon. It was incredible. And I remember jokingly, typical Jewish humor, I jokingly said, watch, they won't carry it much longer since it's this good. Sure enough, it was like 3 months later, they didn't have it anymore. And I can't find it. I couldn't even find it online just now. Costco one time had fire roasted smoked salmon, and I literally cannot find it. I can't find who made it. I just have to pretend that it never happened. I know it happened. But I can't find it. So that's the answer to that. Tammy asked, how about your thoughts on a town issuing threats and harassments in order to get what they want? That's literally what we fight all the time. That's what You Are the Power does. We find examples of local governments threatening and harassing people to accomplish their political goals, and we organize their communities to fight against it. And we have a pretty good success rate. So Tammy, if you're watching this, go to youarethepower.net, and we have a contact page. Fill out our form, and we'll see if we can help. And the rest of you, if you have not done so, go to youarethepower.net and sign up to become a member today. We do have free memberships. We also have paid memberships that come with some swag and stuff like that. And you're helping to support the mission of You Are the Power if you do get a paid membership. But all members are members. Paid, free, and it doesn't matter. All members get access to the same membership network. You get access to the same email newsletter. Very soon we are working on some other tools as well. We have some members-only social media groups that you are tuned into. We will have your region's organizer will get in touch with you so you can be a part of it. Doesn't matter if you paid or not. We just want to have you be a part of it. If you're in a position to help us financially, we definitely could use that as well. We just want people to be involved. Youarethepower.net. Sign up today. When will you release the context of your mixtape? Armstrong asked. Never. It's on this phone right here. I listen to it on a regular basis. I've even added tracks to it. And it is online right now. You can find, well, let me rephrase that. It is available to find my mixtape online right now. But no one has found it, and you never will. People have been looking for 3 years. You will not find it. You will never find it. I'm going to answer some more questions, but briefly I want to talk about something else I've been working on. And it's some of you may have seen a post that I put up a few days ago about my friend Johnny McCoy and what he's been working on, and I'm actually working with him on it. Johnny McCoy is an attorney who has spent the past few years fighting for the rights of people who have been abused by their government. What led him into doing that was back when he was a corporate attorney back in 2009. He was in Columbia, South Carolina, oddly enough. He was in Columbia with his friend, and they went out one night just to hang out, and they went to a bar, and the police were arresting his friend. They said that he was refusing to leave a bar, that the body cam footage ended up showing that to be a lie, but that's what they were saying. And they started arresting his friend. Johnny is an attorney, so he said, what are you arresting him for? On suspicion of what crime? Why aren't you reading him his Miranda rights? What's going on? And they responded by assaulting him and arresting him as well for asking questions and asserting his friend's rights. Johnny went to jail, spent a few days there. While he was in there, he saw some terrible things, including someone ending their life. And very, very traumatic. He got out. The charges were dropped. Years later, he was able to actually to get the law that they arrested him on struck down for being arbitrary and capricious. So they actually got the courts involved and struck it down. And he got a settlement from that. But he also got trauma from that. And he started his own firm. He was able to represent some high-profile people in South Carolina who were abused and treated terribly by the government, including one man named Julian Benton, who was shot up by a SWAT team. They came into his house over suspicion that he had $100 worth of cannabis. They came in, shot him like 30 times, almost killed him. He's paralyzed from the, I think, chest down. And they slandered him while he was in the hospital. They arrested him on all these different charges. They said that he was trying to murder them. They said he fired first when they came in. They said that they knocked first and all this stuff. Everything in the videos proved that to be a lie. They threatened his mother. They threatened his family. And Johnny was able to get him a settlement as well. But during all of this, Johnny was falling apart. The trauma, especially of representing people who also were being harmed by government, just kept reminding him of what he went through in those nights he had spent in jail, and it got worse and worse and worse. He ended up with a crippling addiction to benzos, and things were just going downhill. He even met his incredible wife Sia, or he met an incredible woman named Sia who he then married, and now she's his incredible wife. But even still, he was falling apart, and it reached a point where he tried to end his life. Thankfully, he failed. He was able to get clean and is now, has gotten his mental health in a good place. But he realized that he wasn't the only person struggling with mental health issues. And unlike him, many other people weren't successful attorneys who could get the finest doctors and the finest treatments and all of that stuff. And he also realized one of the critical missing components that finally did help with his health was that there wasn't really good peer support. He was relying on this top-down healthcare system, mental health care system, that seeks to give you a diagnosis and then give you a treatment and get insurance approval and go through all of that. And it wasn't serving him. And again, he was getting the best of the best of the best, but it wasn't fully serving him. What really ended up happening was helping was getting that peer support. And what caused him and many others to struggle to get that peer support for quite some time was walking into a room with a bunch of other people and unloading everything that you were going through, your deepest, darkest fears and concerns and everything else. He just couldn't, a lot of people can't do that. And he realized he wanted to give back, and he wanted to create something that would be able to help people fill that critically missing need in for their mental health. And so he started something called White Flag. White Flag is a free app. It is a mental health resource. It is anonymous. It is peer-based, and it allows you to go on. You can go to whiteflagapp.com. In fact, I'll put it in the chat here. It won't be on Instagram, but if you go to my bio, you'll see White Flag app there, and you can get there's a bunch of different links there. Pull up the White Flag, but if you go to whiteflagapp.com, or if you go to whatever app store you use for your particular phone, Android or iPhone, you can download it today. You can sign up. It's anonymous. Create your profile. You explain the different things you're struggling with, some other information, and then from there, it then goes, it connects you with other people on the White Flag app who are dealing with similar things, and you're able to talk with one another in your timing where you need it, and when you are in a situation of needing people for help, you can it's called putting up your white flag, basically saying, I give up, I need help, and people can help you, or you can help people. If you see people that are on there, in fact, a lot of people have, one of the things that they were dealing with was a feeling of a lack of purpose. And they go on there and they're helping people, like lots of people, and they feel fulfilled because they're actually helping people, and so that helps their mental health as well. And so White Flag has been very successful in a relatively short period of time. They have over 100,000 users, a million instances, they call it, of people who needed help getting help. That is 100,000 people. That is a million times that someone said, I can't do this alone. And that could have been everything from, hey, I'm kind of stressed out, I could use some help, to I don't see how I can make it to tomorrow, and everything in between. And a million times that they were able to get help and see another day, another week, another month, another year. That's 100,000 people who are experiencing better mental health because they're getting access to it. And it's completely free. It's a really cool thing. It's called White Flag. Now, what I do want to mention is that, and full disclosure, I want to tell you ahead of time, Johnny is my friend. I believe in his mission. I believe that White Flag is an incredible resource, and so I'm actually an investor in White Flag. And right now, White Flag is offering, they're doing a crowdfunding. They are raising the funds to be able to expand White Flag. They want to be able to have 1 million, 10 million, even more than that users. And in order to do that, to keep up with the demand, they need to have more developers, and they need to have a lot more stuff. And they don't want to introduce advertising and other ways of introducing revenue yet, at least, and so they're raising the funds to be able to do that. It is it is modeled as a for-profit company, and they will eventually have advertising and things like that to be able to raise revenue. But for now, they want to basically allow people to invest at the ground floor to be able to invest and to give them the funds they need to expand. They'd like to be able, right now they're only available in the US and Canada. They'd like to be able to expand to all English-speaking countries. They'd eventually like to be able to introduce different language support, so it can be in other countries as well. Once you start expanding into different countries, you have to have people on board who understand the different compliance laws for the different countries and things like that. So they just need to be able to have the funds to be able to do that expansion. And so they have a crowdfunding campaign on Start Engine. The minimum investment is $250, but you're actually getting, you're not donating, you're actually getting however many shares a piece of White Flag. And you can donate up to, I think they were trying to raise just over $1 million, so you can donate way more than that. I'll actually put the link into, if you want to check out the crowdfunding, I'll put the link here in the chat. And if you're on Instagram, if you go to my bio, it says there's a link that says White Flag links. If you go to that, it has all the download links, and at the bottom it also has the link to the Start Engine. That's what the crowdfunding's called. So minimum $250. You can donate up to, or not donate. You can invest up to $1 million if you had a spare $1 million you were thinking of spending today. But what that allows you to do is you're investing at today's valuation for White Flag. I'm personally invested. I am an investor, and I personally, I'm not an investment advisor. Past performance does not indicate future investments. As always, do your own due diligence. Blah 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 blah. I'm saying all of that. I personally believe. I think this stock easily has the value. This company has the value to increase in value by 10-fold or even 100-fold. I mean, let's do the math. It's currently got a valuation, an independent company evaluated it for $25 million. That's based on 100,000 users. If it gets 10 million users using that same level of valuation formula, that makes it a $2.5 billion company. Which means if you invested $250 now, and it became worth $2.5 billion, your $250 is worth $25,000. Think of the sheer number of people just in the United States who are battling mental health issues. And I'm not talking about like schizophrenics and things like that. People that are stressed out, people that may have, PTSD, people that may have an actual diagnosed disorder or issue, but also just people who are just struggling in general. People who are sad, people who feel hopeless, or people who are helping care for someone who has these issues. They can go on there as well. 10 million is, can easily be able to. Yes, Eric says Spike likes the stock. Yes, exactly. I like the stock. Very much so. Not an investment advisor. I just like the stock. So I personally believe it's going to go up quite a bit. Don't know, but I do believe it will. And so for all of my fans and followers, if you would like to check it out, if you go to the link there, the Start Engine link, minimum $250 investment. You can invest anything more than that you want. They are trying to get, White Flag is trying to get, by the 25th, they're trying to get 100 individual investors on the crowd fund. Right now it's at, I think 60. Oh, it went up. It's 63. It's got 63 investors. So it's 37 investors short of reaching 100. What happens when they get 100? The system that they're using, Start Engine, when they get 100 investors, Start Engine will send out an email to everyone that's ever used Start Engine, that is invested in anything on Start Engine. And they have over 1 million or 1.5 million users. So all of them will receive an email telling them about White Flag and what the pros of White Flag, why they should invest and all that stuff. So that opens up White Flag not only to a bunch of people who may want to invest, but people who may want to download it. I mean, there's your 1 million users right there, right? To get more users. And then if there are different thresholds after that will then lead to more email blasts and more. So it's not just about raising the funds. It's also about getting the word of White Flag out. And of course, the more that happens, the more the press wants to cover it. It becomes a human interest story. The end goal here is to get White Flag out to as many people as possible. I believe that it is, it's a healthcare revolution. I think that it is filling a gap that simply hasn't been met by anyone. Online, anonymous peer support when you need it. Not just going to a weekly AA or NA or similar peer support meeting where you have to be in front of people at a specific location at a specific time, but instead similar model of peer support, but on your terms, in your time, wherever you need it. You could be at work, you could be at home, you could be traveling. Wherever you are, you pull out your phone, you pull up the White Flag app, and you either ask for help or you help people who need it. I think it's an incredible thing, and that's the other thing with peer support and with Eric just brought it up. With mandatory reporting, when you are talking to a therapist, there may be certain things you avoid saying because the therapist is legally required to report it. Same thing with peer support. There's usually mandatory reporting there as well. This eliminates all of that. This is just people talking with one another. So anyway, if you want to check it out, whiteflagapp.com to sign up. And the Start Engine is startengine.com/whiteflagapp. I have the link there. If you're an investor type, you got $250, you want to take a ride on something that best case scenario, you get a bunch of money from it. Worst case scenario, you spent $250 helping a mission you believe in and you didn't get anything back. And more than likely the scenario happened somewhere in between there where you get something back. If you go to the Start Engine to crowdfund, it would be a great thing. Libertarian JRT asked a really good question. Spike, how does the White Flag quality assure the community for bad actors? So basically, how are they making sure that there aren't bad actors there? The short answer is far better than Facebook or any of these other social media or, frankly, text messaging or any other way that people try to reach people are doing. They do have moderation in place, not of content, but against bad actors. If anything happens, if you see someone say it, or if someone says something to you that is that goes against their terms, that is abusive or exploitative or anything or harassing or anything like that, you report it. It's looked at very quickly, and that person is permanently removed. And I believe even IP blocked. It's either device blocked or IP blocked, or maybe both. They have very, very robust protections in place for such a thing. Now, so far, they've had next to no issues. 100,000 users, over 1 million instances. There really hasn't been any issues. And it would make sense that there haven't been any issues. Because if you're really looking to harass someone, why would you go to a site where you have no idea who the people are you're talking to? Why wouldn't you go to a site where you can make a fake account and talk to people who are using their actual identities. There's a lot of that happening on Facebook, on YouTube, on I'm sure on X, on Instagram, like on all these different social media. That's happening all the time. And they don't have robust protections in place, right? They're too busy making sure you don't share a picture of Hunter Biden or something like that. But they're certainly not protecting against harassment or abuse. So far better than that. Anyway, Lion says, please keep this live stream available so we can go back and retrieve links. Absolutely. This is going to get shared afterwards so we can see it. Yeah, so anyway, that's my thoughts on white flag. I think it is an incredible thing. If you are looking for help, there's nothing wrong with that. You can go to whiteflagapp.com and get the help you need. You can also provide help to others who need it. If you're looking at investing, I think it might be a good investment opportunity. They are crowdfunding. startengine.com/whiteflagapp. You can sign up today. They're trying to get to that 100 investors by the 25th or 20th. Yeah, 25th. So that's my spiel there. And again, full disclosure, I have a material interest in whether or not you invest because I'm also an investor. And at least in theory, the more investors we have, the more money there is. And then the more money I make, because if we have the investors in place, the expansion can happen and more people can be helped. And that creates value. And the value means it's worth more. And eventually, if there's revenue, then there's revenue that can be had. And it can eventually either go public or whatever, and we can all make money. So I have an material. I'm not purely altruistic in saying this thing, but frankly, the reason I'm invested is because of how strongly I believe in it. If every penny I've given to this, it ends up not working, I will still feel great about it because it helped people in the meantime. Even if it ends up never really making me any real money and it only helped 100,000 people, that's 100,000 people who were helped. So that's my feeling on that. Yes. So, let's see, there are a few other questions here. Ben, what time is it? 7? Yeah, I can go a little bit longer. Ben says, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Javier Milei in Argentina. Here are my thoughts on Javier Milei in Argentina. Argentina is very likely, probably about to have a president who is an anarcho-capitalist, a hardcore libertarian who's not just hardcore in policy, but also hardcore in his presentation. He routinely talks about the vampires of the political caste and how when he gets in, he's going to just, completely remove them from government. He's talking about abolishing the vast majority of agencies. Just incredible. So for anyone who said, libertarianism, so you shouldn't, we need to kind of water it down a little. It sounds scary to people. We need to, make it sound more relatable. Telling people that they can do better for themselves than the government can is relatable. Everyone believes that. Well, anyone who would consider voting for us would believe that. And if they don't believe that, at least for now, those aren't our people. That's not who's going to vote for us. The people who are going to vote for us aren't the ones who just say, I don't like the two parties. They're the ones who say, we are being failed. We need a stark, drastic change. And that's what we need to offer. And it turns out that's highly electable because he's about to get elected. He got first place in the runoff or got first place in the first round, and now in the runoff is favored to win. That's what I think about Javier Milei. I think that whoever the libertarian nominee for president ends up being, that person needs to be an absolute warrior for this movement. He or she needs to give speeches that set people on fire and make them want to run through walls. And he or she needs to present this candidate, they need to present libertarianism as what it is, a stark and drastic departure from the status quo that has created the increasingly dystopian mess that we're in right now. They need to make it clear, that candidate needs to make it clear that libertarians seek nothing short of a revolution. He needs to make it clear that we would have never locked them down. We would have never disarmed them and told them that they can't defend themselves and then failed to defend them and let their cities get overrun, their communities get overrun with criminals and violence. We would have never taken over education and ruined it and then, created ridiculous standards, but then created a backdoor around those standards by encouraging the teachers to decide that the children have disorders and need drugs, and then they don't have to worry about the educational standards for those kids. We see that it started with No Child Left Behind. It's just gone to hell since then. We would have never done any of these things. We would have never run up trillions of dollars in debt and had the Federal Reserve pay trillions of dollars towards that, or create trillions of dollars to fund that debt, and then handed off all that money to our cronies that put us in office. We would have never done any of that. We would have respected them as individual human beings. We would have recognized that we cannot centrally plan everything, and nor should we. And we'd all be happier and more harmonious and more prosperous as a result. We would make it clear. That candidate needs to make it clear, the same way we're seeing in Argentina. That candidate needs to make it clear that we seek nothing short of a revolution. Peaceful revolution, but a revolution nonetheless, and that we invite everyone to join us for it. That's what we should be doing. Those are my thoughts on that. Also would like to hear your thoughts on BRICS nation ditching the US dollar. Well, you can thank the central bankers for that. You can thank decades of using the US dollar as a cudgel to force the world into U.S. friendly policy and invading any country that doesn't hold U.S. dollars in their foreign reserves, which is basically bankrolling our debt, or I should say our government's debt, telling foreign countries that they have to help, prop up our currency so that our debt doesn't become worthless, or else we'll invade them. That's what happened. And the thing is, as the US dollar declines relative to other currencies, we're going to suffer. The people who are in power and who have access to the printing presses or are in close proximity to when that money's being handed out, they're not going to suffer because they can just print out more. It's always going to be worth something. They can just print out and print out and print out and print out and stick us with the bill for it. And the only way that ends is not just by ending the Fed, but getting government out of currency entirely. Make currency what it really is. Money needs to be something the market is providing that has actual value, and not just some fiction that's being created by government to achieve their political goals and forcing you to use it. And if the government can no longer print out its own currency to fund its own political goals and stick us with the bill for it, and they have to use the same currency the rest of us use and can't just create it out of thin air, they actually have to live within their means. So there's many different good things that come from that. Where do you stand on constitutional term limits on members of Congress and the Supreme Court? I mean, technically, the Supreme Court does have one term. It's just forever. I'm not a fan of the Supreme Court justices having to worry about getting elected. I will tell you that, because the entire purpose, ostensibly, of the Supreme Court is that they don't have to worry about the political winds of change. They don't have to worry about public opinion. All they have to do is read the Constitution and apply it to whatever court decision is in front of them. Now, unfortunately, they have well over a century of garbage precedent that they're relying on, like stare decisis, the idea that if a court has ruled on something in the past that they have to defer to that. That's the stupidest, that's the dumbest. That should completely go away, stare decisis. Every single decision should be decided from scratch based on a blank textual reading of the Constitution. At no point should saying, well, this justice that died 50 years ago said this. I don't think that's true. Constitution says this, but dead justice number 27 said this. Who cares? Anyway, so I don't like stare decisis. I definitely don't like Chevron deference, which is the idea. And then there's another one that's also a deference, but basically the idea that, well, we defer to the experts that the government has put in place. No. There's nothing about the experts in the Constitution. You're supposed to read the Constitution and apply it to this situation. Does the Constitution grant the government the authority to do this? That's it. This should be simple. My fear is that if they get reelected or have to worry about getting reelected, that now they're just going to become another, Congress or Senate, and there'd be even less likely for them to be constructionists. So I'm not a fan of that. The idea of them having one term and so that they're not in there forever or whatever, I understand that idea. I'm not sure it would be a huge change one way or the other. I'm not against term limits on members of Congress, but I think we're looking at the wrong problem. We're trying to fix the symptom instead of the problem. We look at incumbents and go, they get more and more and more and more corrupt, and so we should kick them out before that happens. Okay, fair enough. Let's do that. Okay, fine, let's do that. But why are they getting more corrupt? It's because they can print out, they can legislate the spending of money that doesn't exist yet, because they know that the Federal Reserve will print out however much money is needed to lend to the Treasury, and then they'll just stick you and people that haven't even been born yet with the debt with interest. So they just spend whatever they want. And if you're a person who has the ability to spend whatever you want on whatever you want, you're creating a tremendous supply of something that would otherwise not exist, and the demand is going to come up to meet it. And that's where the cronyism comes in. So if you really, 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 really want to address corruption in politics, and we talk a lot about we need to get money out of politics, and that's true. The best way to do that is to get politics out of money, and the Federal Reserve and the and the government issuance of currency, and so that money is something that is provided by competing market forces. The government has to go to get money the same way the rest of us do, and has to get it voluntarily, and the IRS, get rid of all taxation, make the government do what literally every other organization and every other person is expected to do. Get money voluntarily in exchange for things that the person who gave them money perceived to have more value than the money that they were giving them. Period. That's how you live, that's how I live, that's how everyone else lives, except the government. You do that, they have to live within their means, they have to be accountable, they have to provide us with things we actually want, and not provide us with things we don't want, which is they'll be doing way more of not providing, and we'll have our money back. That's how you deal with that. Term limits for Congress, sure. It's not going to fix it. Maybe it'll help things get better, but that's not the problem. If you want to deal with the core problem, take away their money to steal from you and to print out endless money. They get to insulate themselves from feedback mechanisms that literally everyone else has to deal with, which is price signaling and people choosing not to use their services. They insulate themselves from that by creating as much money as they want and forcing you to pay them. So take that away from them, and now they'll be held accountable. Michael, do you think Hunter Biden's lawyers will be successful arguing that Form 4473 is unconstitutional? I sure as hell hope so. If that's what they're doing, I sure as hell hope so, Michael. Let me tell you something. So for those who don't know, Form 4473 is one of the forms that the ATF makes you fill out, and he filled it out illegally. He said that he didn't use drugs, and he does use drugs. And of course, as a libertarian, I believe that the Second Amendment is very clear. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Didn't say anything about if you use drugs. Didn't say anything about anything. It literally said that a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And every person whose opinion is worth the salt says, of course, that the well-regulated militia is you. the people. When I think it was Madison was asked by a letter was written to him saying, just to be clear, does the Second Amendment mean I get to keep my cannon? I believe it was Madison, said, yes. It was one of the founders who said, yes, absolutely. Yes, you can keep your cannon. Because you're the militia. The people are the militia. Which means that the government has no ability to tell you any terms, or should not have the ability to tell you any terms by which you can own any arm of any kind. You want to talk about a future-proofed document? They didn't even say guns. They didn't even say fire. They said arms. Any weaponry. And I believe it was in that same letter that Madison, if it was Madison, I believe it was Madison, who said that essentially whatever the government has, weaponry-wise, the people should be able to have. So, yes, Form 44373 and every other ATF form and the existence of the ATF and the freaking NFA that created it and the Gun Control Act that was signed by Reagan and every gun control act before and since is blatantly unconstitutional and should be treated as such. Now, how amazing and ironic would it be? Because if they successfully argue that Form 4473 is unconstitutional, goodbye ATF. Effectively goodbye federal gun control. If the courts go, you shouldn't have to fill out a form to own a firearm. That's an infringement. And it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Keep in mind, this is the Supreme Court under Bruin, the Bruin decision that was written by Clarence Thomas, that straight up said, if you can't show this gun control as being an acknowledged and normal thing that was happening in the colonies prior to the writing of the Second Amendment, it's an infringement. Which means they're all infringements. So they could very well do that. And if that happens, federal gun control is essentially gonzo, or at least much closer to being gonzo. And imagine if the catalyst for that was Hunter Biden. I'll take it. Done. I'm sold. So this was from a bunch of y'all. Various questions about why I'm allowing the Jewish space laser to be used for all these different recent tragedies and tragedies of the past. I want to make something clear, and I've said this before, but I've got you all here. I want to be clear about something. I have the Jewish space laser controller. Okay? It is unplugged. You can't, nothing's happening. It's not wireless, I checked. Nothing's happening right now. This is fine. The switch means nothing. In fact, you know what? If I make you feel better, switch is off. Okay? So, especially now. So don't worry about it. I got the laser controller. I'm not giving it back. I said I was just keeping it for Rosh Hashanah. I lied. Anyway. Mike, if you could eat dinner with anyone living or dead, what would you eat? Smoked salmon. Michael, we've had a lot of Michaels and Mikes. Michael said a near universal cry from voters on all sides is to get money out of politics. However, I think I already answered this. However, as soon as one begins to investigate the issue, you always arrive at the First Amendment protecting political spending. Yes. Considering the First Amendment has historically had essentially two outs, obscenity and danger to the public, can the argument be made that excessive political spending is in fact obscene and is a danger to the public? You can argue anything, but I think they were very clear when they, obscenity meant like lewdness and even there, over time, they've evolved on that, right? Like for a long time, pornography was not considered protected, and eventually they said no, pornography is protected, and things like that. I mean, I guess you can make that argument, but what ends up happening, you don't want, let me tell you something, as someone who has operated in the political sphere, having the government regulate political donations and political contributions only serves the people in power. They create all of these barriers and hoops and forms and reporting and all this stuff and make it where it's essentially impossible, increasingly darn near impossible for everyone but the wealthy and powerful who have a legion of attorneys who handle all that stuff and accountants and everything else. Like, they have a whole team in place that handles that. And they're pulling in millions and millions and millions. And they've got people in positions of power. They themselves are in power. So if they break the laws, they either look the other way or give them a little slap on the wrist for it. But they come down on the rest of us if we, neglect to fill a form out correctly. So you don't want them to regulate it. And again, going back to what I said before, the problem with money in politics is that there's there's demanding the supply of political favors and money that government has. Take that away from the government. Take that away from the government. If there's no supply, the demand goes away. Make it so that the ultra wealthy have to serve you to stay wealthy. The consumer or the investor or the whatever. Make it where they have to provide to you to get you to give them any money. And make the government have to provide value to you if they want any of your money that you choose to give them voluntarily. Now, I know all of you are sitting there going, the cold day in hell, I'd give the government money. That's exactly the point. Can you imagine how small the government would be and how hyper focused its priorities would be if it only received money from people voluntarily in exchange for the things that we wanted them to do? You want to talk about a constitution that fits within, or a government that fits within the confines of the Constitution? How about one that fits within the confines of market demand for it? I mean, talk about a small government. Voluntarist asked, how do governments acquire and maintain political authority, where political authority is the right to rule over a population who has a duty to obey those dictates? How do they acquire and maintain it? Through violence and threats of violence. Like how they don't, no one is, even if you think that government is legitimate and that government has a proper use or whatever, you have to go into mental gymnastics to explain the precepts of government. Consent of the governed? Does that mean that anyone who doesn't consent can opt out? That's how any other contract would work, right? The social contract. What are the terms of the social contract? When did I ever sign it? Do you know the terms? Has anyone shown you this contract? When did we sign it? Was it at the very moment of conception or birth? And why would that contract hold up under contract law? We say that only people of majority age can even agree to a contract, but yet we agreed to it the very moment that we existed. Or it's not even you agreed, but it simply exists and you have to abide by it. Well, that ain't a contract and that ain't consent. So, let's call it what it is. Government exists and has the authority that it presumes because they'll kill you if you don't accept it. Or they'll use whatever level of force is necessary to bring you into whatever compliance they need from you. Which is why government power also doesn't exist. All there is what they're willing to try to put on us and what we're willing to tolerate. So, yeah, I mean, political authority is a euphemism for powerful people imposing themselves on you. That's what it is. That's what government is. Even those who, you don't have to be an anarcho-capitalist like me to believe that. Even the minarchists say the same thing. Even the constitutionalists say the same thing. They recognize it as an evil. They just think it's a necessary evil. Okay. Maybe it's a necessary evil, but it's still an evil. Maybe it's a necessary, syndicated crime monopoly, but it's still a syndicated crime monopoly. It might be a necessary one, but it still is one. So I think I'll close out on this one because it's like, what is it, 7? Yeah, it's a little bit past what I was originally thinking. But a bunch of y'all asked various versions of how does a libertarian candidate get on the debate stage. The short answer is a libertarian to get on the debate stage by the Commission on Presidential Debates, the CPD's standards. You have to get 15% or more in at least 3 reputable opinion polls. But they don't have to include you in the poll. Like there's no rule that says Gallup or Pew or what are some of the other ones? Any of the news ones, CNN, Fox, any of that. Rasmussen, none of them, nothing says they have to include you in the poll. They usually don't include us in the poll. And by the time they do include us in the polls, it's so late in the game that, you know, people have already been deciding between the Republicans and the Democrats that they endlessly hear about in the media. So the real way to get a Republican or a Libertarian on the debate stage, it's actually twofold. Well, no, even that goes back to the same thing. Because the answer to how do we get a Libertarian on the debate stage is the same answer to the question of how do we get Republicans and Democrats to participate in a debate that isn't, you know, part of the CPD. And it's also the same answer to the question of how do we get more people to vote Libertarian. And it's also the same answer to the question of how do we get more attention on libertarians. And the answer is we have to show people that libertarianism makes enough sense for them to take the perceived risk to vote for us. I want to be clear about something. It's very frustrating for us as libertarians to hear over and over again, I'm not going to vote for you because I don't think you can win, and so I'm not going to vote for you, which, you know, that makes that become true. If enough people don't vote for you, you can't win. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's very, very frustrating for us. But what they're saying is, I don't know enough about you relative to the other parties, even if it sounds like what you're saying is good. I don't trust you enough to take the risk of giving you my vote instead of the lesser evil party that I think is better than the worse evil party, and therefore I'm not going to vote for you. And so what that means is we have to show them that it is better and that it is worth that perceived risk, which is why I believe we need to be focusing on local elections. We're already winning them. We have hundreds of elected libertarian officials across the country. Even though our focus is primarily on the federal and the statewide and congressional and those types of races, we're still winning in those races. So let's win more of them. Let's show people in their backyards what libertarianism is, because the reality is, if they won't include us in the debates because they're not including us in the polling, it's because they kind of can't ignore us. Let's say at one point 10 or 15% of people would say libertarian in a poll. That's not enough for where they can't just ignore us. We need to have like 20, 25, 30% of the public saying, I want to pick someone, I think these libertarians might be. They would then have to include us in the polls. Now we're on the debate stage. We now also have a shot of winning. We now also have a shot of bringing many more people into the party. You have to start at the local level. And the way that you start at the local level is by getting people elected at those races. And when we do that, not only do you show people what libertarianism looks like in practice and not just theory, by showing them actual elected libertarians and what they've been able to accomplish in their role in the city council, as a mayor, as a sheriff, the zoning board, school board, the state legislature, whatever. Not only can you show that, not only are you building up your stable of candidates who can now go from, you know, local office to statewide office or even state legislative races, and then they can run for governor, they can run for Congress, they can run for Senate, they can run for attorney general, of their state or their secretary of state or whatever. They can run for these different races because they're a known name and a known commodity that people like. But we're killing the main thing that's holding us back, which is the prevailing narrative that people have in their head that we can't win. When we actually win races, we show them that not only do we win, but when we win, they win for a change too. They're so conditioned to believing that the Republicans or the Democrats are going to win, and you got to just decide which one you want to win. And yeah, you're probably still going to mostly lose, and politicians are liars and blah, 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 blah. But, it is what it is, and you just got to pick which one's lies you like more. What if we show them that we get into office and claw back against a completely out of control government and put the power back in their hands, and they live better lives as a result? Not only will they stop believing we can't win, but they wouldn't even consider voting for someone else. Even if they were told we had a 1 in 300 bazillion chance of winning, they'd say, I'll take that one because I don't want anything but this. What they're doing in my city council, what they're doing in my zoning board, what they're doing as in charge of the sheriff's department, what they're doing in charge of the school board, what they're doing in my state legislature, what they're doing as mayor, what they're doing as whatever the different races are, what they're doing is so much better than what anyone else is offering. That's all I'm voting for. And if you call me and ask me who I'm voting for, I'm only saying that party. And if you don't give me that party option, I'll say other, because I don't want anything else. And if that other gets up to like 20, 25, 30%, they can't ignore that. And we get on the debate stage and we get more people into the party and we get more support. Eventually we win. But we got a lot of growing to do before that. And we have to stop pretending that we can just hop, skip, jump to the White House. We've been trying that for 51, going on 52 years. It's not going to work. We do still need to run candidates for the White House. Okay? Some states require it for ballot access. I want to apologize. My chair is falling apart. I need a new chair. I don't know if it's loud to you, but I keep hearing it like grinding and squeaking. But anyway, we need to win those races. We need to run candidates in those races, okay? Some states require it just for anyone to have ballot access. Like you can't run for anything in some states unless you have a presidential candidate and a gubernatorial candidate and a secretary of state candidate and all this stuff, right? So like there's, you have to run these races. And if you're going to run the people in these races, they need to be Spitfires. They need to be our equivalent of the Javier Mileis or the Ron Pauls or whatever. We need to have the warriors that are bringing people into the movement and selling them on a totally different way of looking at how government should be interacting with the people. And we should be doing that with all the other races too. But we need to be clear of understanding that, yes, there's nothing legally stopping our candidate from winning, but we know what the odds are. And we're going to fight until we can win. But in the meantime, we're also going to fight for the races that we're winning already. And that's where our focus needs to be. And we can grow up from there. And we do all sorts of incredible things. So I am going to leave it at there. Oh, Libertarian Lady says 55,000 people in Duval County, Florida, voted for Eric Parker because they were tired of the Duval duopoly of the Republicans and Democrats. And that's 100% correct. Eric Parker came very, very close to winning his city council race. And it's likely he could win in the future. And that's in a very large county. In fact, I think it's the largest city geographically in the country or something like that. It's a big metro area. And he came very close to winning. And, we can win many more. We are winning, and we can continue to win. And that's not just for libertarians. That's for everyone. That's for everyone that wants to get rid of the two-party system. That's going to be the way forward. Focus local, build your way up from there. Do whatever you need at the national level to maintain ballot access and to be the, present vanguards for the party and all of that. But recognize this is not going to be a top-down thing. We're not going to magically get into the White House and trickle down liberty on everyone. It's going to be from the ground up. So those are my thoughts on that. The entire county is Jacksonville. So those are my thoughts on that. And Joe Hanush got 74,000 votes in his race. He's in Florida as well. So I appreciate you guys being at. What time is it now? Yeah, it's like 7:35. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I appreciate you all for being a part of this. I will leave you with all the stuff I had said before. I'll put all the links in there. This first link is to our event on, our first link is our event, and if you're on Instagram, this is in my bio, is to our event in Columbia, South Carolina, the You Are the Power event in Columbia, South Carolina on Saturday the 30th, starting at 10 a.m. in Finley Park in Columbia. We'd love to have you join us if you're nearby, or share it to others. If you know anyone that lives in the area, we'd love to have you come out and join us. We also, if you go to youarethepower.net, you can become a member today. We'd love to have you join us and be a part of the movement. I had mentioned White Flag before. I'll go ahead and drop that again. If you or someone you know is in need of a great anonymous, peer-based app resource for mental health on their phone that they can go on and get help that they need anytime, whiteflagapp.com, or you can search for White Flag on whatever app store you use for your phone, Google Play or the App Store. And if you want to be involved in the crowdfunding for White Flag, which, full disclosure, I am an investor in White Flag as well, and I am not an advisor, so I just like the stock. If you go to startengine.com/White Flag app, or again, if you're in Instagram, you can go to my bio. The links are there as well. We'd love to have you be an investor, take the ride with us as we go to the moon. That is not, I'm not guaranteeing we're going to the moon, but I think we're going to go to the moon. I like the stock. Then you can be a part of it. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to everyone's questions. There are a lot of questions there, but I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. How do we join You Are the Power? youarethepower.net. If you press membership, you can go right there, be a part of it. We'd love to have you join us. And thank you all so much. Thank you for tuning in. I suspect I'll be doing these a little bit more often. We are going to start having members-only live streams for You Are the Power. So become a member of You Are the Power. You can start tuning into those. I'll be able to take on a lot more of the questions because the audience won't be quite as big as here. Anyway, love y'all. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Have a great rest of your evening, and bye-bye. Where do I... Okay, first... Okay, that turns that off.